Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the next episode in What Makes You Tick. Today, I'm very, very happy to share a story with you of somebody who has been massively inspiring to me throughout my life. And as I said to people who've listened in the past, that this podcast is all about people who inspire me in different ways, in different facets of my life. And I'm delighted to welcome my cousin, Sarah, onto the podcast. Sarah, great to have you.
Hey Steve, thanks for having me. My pleasure to be here.
It's the reason I wanted to bring you on, Sarah, was a couple of things, a couple of reasons, right? So you and I have become like as cousins, we've been really, really close in terms of friendship, and we've always been there for each other at different stages, especially after when your grand passed away years ago, that's when we really ignited our friendship, right? And since then, lots of things have happened in our lives, and we've been there for each other at different stages, which is brilliant. But aside from that, one of the reasons that I kind of wanted to bring you onto the podcast is that you're a mother of two kids, two gorgeous, gorgeous kids. I'm lucky enough to be godfather of one of them, which is fantastic,
Yeah.
Lucy. But I might as well be kind of godfather as well of Ellen. We'll say nothing. But anyway, so you're a mother of two kids, but you're not only that, you're an entrepreneur, you're a teacher, you're a yoga teacher, you're an author. You do so much, and you're always constantly learning, and you're constantly growing, and you're constantly trying to find a way to kind of improve your, I suppose, to challenge yourself in different ways, but also then to kind of enjoy life and make the most of life and make it as best as you can. And that for me is massively inspiring, and that for me is kind of one of the reasons why I went down and created this podcast, is because people like you in my life who are doing things and putting themselves out there. What Makes You Tick was an opportunity for me to do the same, and it's been great. So first of all, brilliant to have you on. How is everything going? Would that be a fair summation of what you do? There may be other things.
Yeah, there's been other bits as well along the way. But yeah, that sounds about right. Absolutely, you hit the nail on the head there.
So
Um,
why don't we talk about family? Because obviously we're family, but why don't we talk about family in terms of your own? Because I suppose that would be kind of like anybody's kind of foundation when it comes to life, and the way you kind of start off is that your kind of background, and that growing up in a family that is based in Kildare and very much ingrained within the Irish Army, would
yeah.
be interesting to see and hear what it was like growing up, and what kind of things you took from those kind of formidable times in your life to help you to where you are today.
Oh gosh, well, I suppose yeah, army brat, and now an army wife. Yeah, we grew up in Kildare. Both mum and dad were Limerick, and moved in their early 20s, and set up camp here, I suppose, as such, because dad was stationed in the Curragh. And I mean, yeah, I suppose my whole life revolved around barracks and in and out to the Curragh, all different facets of life, really, I suppose. But yeah, that obviously was an influential part of my growing up.
Yeah, because I had John, your dad, on the podcast at the start. I think it was episode 4 or 5. But John spoke to me about his time in the Lebanon, and obviously time starting off in the army as well, and moving into the UN and stuff. But I think it's interesting for me that when people, now that you say you're an army wife, but obviously throughout being in the army, there's times where John spoke to me about going on tour and having to travel, and
Yeah,
back in the times when he was doing it in the 70s and 80s and stuff, is that you didn't have social media, you didn't have the internet, you didn't have the connection that we have today through the likes of Zoom, FaceTime, and all that stuff. So you literally had to kind of put down pen to paper and send off your letters to your loved ones, right? What was that like for you as a kid, seeing that with your dad heading off?
um, I suppose it's funny, really. My memory, I've no, I don't overly remember in a big kind of dad's going away and it was a big deal, or anything like that. And it wasn't that he went so often, it was normal. It wasn't like that. He would go for 6 months at a time, and he would come home after 3 months, or there was a bit of leave in there in the middle, and then he would come home again and back to work. And then a year or two could pass before he might go again. But I never remember. I remember he was gone for some bigger occasions. I know he was gone for my confirmation. I remember that because we moved house around the same time as well, and I suppose that memory just all stands out.
Yeah.
But I suppose that was down to mum really as well. Nothing was ever a big deal. It was, we just, it was what it was, and he was gone, and she used to have photos of him beside my bed, and and we would write to him regularly. I remember the old envelopes. The letter was the envelope, and you'd write it up and write it up and then seal it up and post it, kind of airmail envelopes back in the time. And I remember being on calls to him, and every time you would finish what you had to say, you would have to say over. I still have visions of some guy sitting in a room somewhere, switching plugs over, like, okay, over, and back to Dad, and then he'd like, everything is great, how are you going, over, and then back to us again. And there certainly wasn't any FaceTime. I mean, the calls were, I don't remember again, but I'm sure they were far and few between. They wouldn't have been regular daily calls by any stretch.
But it's still tough because like you're even though probably you don't remember some of the stuff, there's definitely things that people, I think, when they hear about families within the army and they hear that they've grown up in the army and stuff, like they say, "Oh, sure, you're used to it," But like now that you've married Messer from the army, but now that you've married Brian and he goes on tours and stuff, like it can never just get easy. It can never just be like, oh well, you're conditional to it. Like it must be always tough.
I don't think you could ever say to anybody that you could be used to something, that you could get used to being on your own for 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, whatever the deployment is. And yes, there's leave built in, there as well and stuff like that, and they come home for a break. But no, I mean, ultimately, when Dad was gone, Mum was on her own, and now when Brian is gone, I'm on my own with the two girls. And you have family and friends and that will support you in and out. But at the end of the day, you're running the show ultimately as a single parent, even though that I always feel there's a deadline, a timeline. It's it's only for a certain amount of time, but it can be fairly full on. As anyone who's a parent knows, that it's the day in, day out. It's the breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, rinse and repeat. Can be tedious when you're on your own, and can be tough going. And I don't think that that's something you could ever get used to. That would be your norm. I think that's always. But like that, I suppose, like Mum did, I do now. You kind of make the best of it, especially for the kids. You'd never speak negatively in front of them, or you'd always be protecting them from kind of when you get frustrated and run down and stuff like that. You just you keep going, and you put on you the smiles, and you have your little bit of time out. You get your bit of support with your family and friends, and it's hard, but again, there's always, I always feel, once they're gone overseas, then that's great, because now the countdown clock is on.
Yes.
And we're ticking back to coming home.
You've something to look forward to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And what do you do, like so obviously when there's times that are tricky, what do you do to kind of handle or get through things? Do you literally just take a time out, or would it be a case of you just ring up a couple of people, have a chat with them, or people call over during the good times when we could through COVID and stuff? But
absolutely, you could have people, over, or you'd land on someone's door and have a cuppa, or the kids were actually in school, so you had a few hours, to yourself when they were going out for those few hours that you could decompress. But with them, I always find as much structure as is possible, without it being military. But you have your little routines and your dinners, and then the weekends can be long because obviously they're full days. So I always found we would have our fun day Sundays, and I would try at least every Sunday we would pack up and we would go up to Dublin, or we would go down the country and find a farmer's market or a playground or somewhere different, and ring someone to meet us on the way, or go off, the three of us, and just have a bit of an adventure, and you know, making memories. That's really, like, you know, what you're doing, and having a bit of fun with them and stuff like that, and getting away from the house and you know,
the four walls, because I think it's so important to get out. And I like, it's interesting that you talk about farmers markets in there, because like one of the things I mentioned there at the start, that you have that kind of, you're an entrepreneur, and that you've set up a number of different businesses and had a cut at different things. And like one of the words that comes to mind when we were young ones was like, he's an ape, she's an ape. And then all of a sudden, then out of the last number of years, you created a product called Eat Like Apes, which is all healthy foods. And from that, then you've gone on to create Play Like Apes, which is all about teaching kids how to learn how to take part in yoga sessions and just kind of understand movement and all that. Where did that desire to, I suppose, be your own boss come from? And what was the eureka moment that you said, do you know what, I could do something here?
Well, I suppose, like all things, it was born out of circumstance. You know, I had gone to college, studied, worked, went back to college, studied, worked, and was made redundant back in 2010. And in that year, that was a busy year, because I was maybe, was it May or June, April maybe, I was made redundant. July we got married. And
what were you working at before that?
I was working in a primary school as a special needs assistant, and at that time there was massive cuts kind of across all departments, especially the government, you know, in education and stuff like that. So I wasn't alone by any means. Lots of SNAs, special needs assistants, lost their jobs at that time. And so I suppose, again, we got pregnant quite quickly, and Lucy was born in the May. And when she was about 6 months, Brian went overseas. So I was torn. It was a kind of a toss-up. What do I do? Do I push to try and get back out the door to work, to have her in a creche while I, you know, go to work? And at the time, mum and dad lived overseas as well. So there was no local family. You know, there was no one kind of nearby that if she was a little unwell or anything like that, I was going to be kind of, so I felt torn. I was like, do I get a job? And then if, you know, she goes into a creche, and I had worked for years in creches, so I know when children start in creches, they pick up everything, and I would have been trying to take time off work and managing it all while Brian was overseas. And we just said, look, we'll hold tough for another while, and let him do the 6 months tour, and then when he comes back, we'll look and see, will I start going back to work again? And another couple of months after that, Ellen arrived. So, you know, it was back to a newborn and a toddler, and they were a blur. When I think back now, gosh, it's a blur, you know. Talk about the rinse, repeat, and recycle and go again. So I, you know, it was actually Lucy's first birthday, and I said, I really need to bake my child a birthday cake for her birthday. I should probably figure out how to do that. So I went researching, and I rang the mammies, and I discovered then a real passion for baking and cake decorating, and I really enjoyed that and did it for a time. And then we kind of looked at how we were eating at home, and kind of went, you know, we need to maybe cut out some of the cake and the rubbish and things like that, and started looking at less processed foods. So that's where the apes kind of comes from. It's that kind of primal background, you know, primal being, you know, basic foods, so your nuts, seeds, veg, protein, you know, and things like that. So we rejigged how we were looking, and then I thought, there's no good snacks for kids. You know, I'm up in Super Value and different shops, and I'm looking around, and it's, I don't know how kids know, but they know the stuff with the most sugar in it. It must be the most neon wrappers that attracts them. And I thought, you know, I could make little snacks for them. I was making them anyway at home. And then out of that, Eat Like Apes was born, really. So with Brian training, I was making protein balls and bites and stuff like that for him anyway.
Yeah.
And then I love granola, so I was making my own granolas, but I was making them grain free. So with just nuts, seeds, dried fruits and things like that. And yeah, I just got really passionate about it, and with the encouragement, of course, of my family and stuff like that, I took it a step further and a step further, and eventually with the enterprise board, I got onto the Super Value Food Academy, and I got a massive support with that. So they really helped with, you know, like anybody who works for themselves, you can only kind of know or be so good at so many things. So I might have been great at recipe development, but where did I buy a bag or get a label printed, you know, or that. So that helped with all that side of it, and that launched and was very successful. Probably a little too successful for me on my own, so it got too big.
But it was great because I remember seeing the products in stores and in Super Values and stuff around, and it's kind of, there's a nice bit of pride to it as well, because literally from grain to store, you were doing every single piece of mixing, molding, match and bake and whatever it was.
Merchandising, packaging, labeling.
Yeah.
Distribution.
Going through the different stages of quality control and all that stuff. Like it was just, it was incredible to see it take off so quickly. But then again, the fact that it took off so quickly meant that like your time wasn't your own then, you know, like you were so focused.
It ate into everything, yeah. So it got to the stage like where, say, the girls are in preschool, so that's kind of, as anyone mommy knows, you've maybe about 2.5 hours to yourself. So I would split the days, and I would, you know, produce and would like get things prepped, then produce the next day, then package them the next day, then label them, then try and get them out, because you really only had that window. And then they were still small, so I could bring them to a point with me, but not, you know, have them in the car for ages driving around.
Yeah.
But so time was, you know, it was under pressure for time and stuff like that all the time. But it's amazing. It's a great motivator as well, what you can get done.
Yeah,
you know, when you need to, you know,
when you've got a deadline, right? And
absolutely.
what do you think is the biggest kind of learning that you would have taken out of that experience?
Just, well, I mean, I suppose I did it from nothing, you know, in that kind of a way. So you can do absolutely anything you set your mind to, really, you know, is to give everything a shot. And, you know, the inner critic would have said, you've no business now going on to a food academy, you know, like, but I applied anyway. And, you know, and I put myself out there, and I thought, well, let's just give it a go. And, you know, at the start, you really like, because obviously your family and friends are saying, oh, they're lovely and they're great, they're so tasty and they're delicious and you should be selling them. And I know lots of people have family who say things, and then you go out into the wider public and it doesn't always ring true. But I had gotten it out into a couple of places. I did a bit of a farmer's market myself, or a local market, and then a coffee shop took a few bits off me, and they were ordering like consistently every week, 20, 30 of the protein balls, kind of, and the different flavors. And I suppose that spoke for itself, really. You know, then it was obvious that people, and they were getting the repeat business, people were coming back looking for them and stuff like that. So yeah, so you'll always have that kind of inner critic, you know, imposter syndrome, kind of telling you can't or don't, or which, you know.
Yeah, I think that's actually really interesting, in that there's a hell of a lot of people who suffer from that, or not suffer from that, but have this, would probably relate to that, in that not thinking you're good enough, or nearly kind of putting yourself down, the self-talk being a bit negative, and not giving yourself the encouragement that you would potentially give to your best friend or to your buddy. Because if you reverse it, and I was listening to was it a podcast? I can't remember what it was, but essentially the message from it was like, don't say anything to yourself that you wouldn't say to your best friend.
Yeah,
And
it's
if
true.
you can treat yourself like that in terms of your self-talk, because I'm a stickler for it as well. My self-talk can be quite negative sometimes, and
Oh
especially when
yeah.
I was playing rugby, or especially when I was competing for something, it would be kind of, you can't do this, you're not good enough, and that would drive you then to train or to do that little bit more. But I remember when you were going for that, for those academies, and when I remember when you were putting yourself forward, and big thing I was always kind of suggesting or saying to you was like, listen, just go for it, because if you don't get it, at least you're in the exact same position now than you were before you applied.
This is it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like that expression, win or learn. You can't lose when you're given something a lash, because even if they came back to me, I think what I find with lots of things is, well, sometimes people come back and it's just sometimes about timing.
Yeah,
Like, I was lucky I got onto that food academy that time. If I had gone the previous time or the time after, there might have been someone with a similar product that
yeah,
might have been uh, further along the line than I was, or had an already more established business, and then they would have been a better investment for them at that time.
yeah,
So
yeah.
you can't beat yourself up. Yeah, sometimes it's just circumstance.
There's so much I want to get through with you as well, and I kind of conscious that there you also, from what was the stage after Eat Like Apes? What came next?
There was a bit of a pause after Eat Like Apes. So when I got to the point where, like that, I was setting it up. Brian was overseas. I remember he came home and he was on leave, and he just spent his whole leave making and packaging protein and getting them out to the different stores with me. But we moved house then, and we had a big investment, into that. And like all things, you cut your cloth, and you make decisions, and the decision was the family, obviously. um
Was that
and
tough?
and
Was that
also,
a tough decision?
it's never really tough when it's for the benefit of your family. Yeah, there's a bit of personal kind of like grief that you kind of, oh God, if I had kept going now, where could that be? But you have to be realistic as well. The food market is a tricky market. It's difficult. It's competitive, and stuff goes out of date. And supermarkets won't pay for it if it doesn't sell. So there's lots of other factors that I had to bring in, and the right choice was to wind it up at that time. And because I felt if I had gone further and outsourced or gotten an investor, then you see you're not working for yourself anymore either.
Yeah,
And that was always at the back of my mind. My whole ethos is really working around us.
yeah,
So I have to be here to drop the girls to school and collect them
yeah.
and bring them to their after school. They're the priority.
Mhm.
And not that I'll slot in and I mean, I'm given lots of, space to do what I want to do. And if I need extra time, again, I have the backup there to call in the cavalry to give me the dig out. But but yeah, it was the right thing to do to wind it up at the time. And I took a little bit of a break away, which was nice as well. Sometimes, when you stop something and you take a step back, you can see the bigger picture as well.
Yeah,
Because when you're in the thick of it, you don't see the wood from the trees. You don't. And what you're doing, right or wrong, you're still plowing, but the step back can give a
it's
perspective.
it's very interesting, as I've spoken to a couple of entrepreneurs on this platform, and what is interesting is that when they do take a step back, they don't realize how much they may have missed out in certain things, and you hear about it with a lot of entrepreneurs who are really successful in a public life, that they get to 50 or 60 or whatever, and they've reached wherever they wanted to get to, but they've missed out on so much of memories and moments and times that they can't replace. And I think what's interesting is those who, you can't get that time back, right? So you having taken that step back to step away and to see the bigger picture, you remove the blinkers, and you got to spend incredible time with your family, and got to grow up with the girls a little bit, and got to see how they acted. But that gave you opportunity then as well to go on and create something else, because you have that drive in you, that kind of doggedness. You're kind of going, hold on, what's next? Okay, I'm hungry now again. Let's go. And interesting. It would be. I'd love to hear about what what happened next after. What was your next kind of your latest endeavor?
Yeah. Well, look, I have to give credit to the girls, because they're like, just when they arrived in, I mean, they're just the most massive motivators for me. I'm so passionate about, uh, they're so innocent and so wonderful, and their questions just drive me to think, God, you're right, we need to learn more about that, or we need to look into that more. And you really want to be able to, I mean, God knows what they're going to ask you, and it's normally at the top of their voice in the middle of a busy supermarket. But you know but yeah, they just motivated me massively, and they're learning, obviously. Everything's new: walk, crawl, walk, run, climb, and I'm seeing that, and I'm going, yeah, you're right, what's next? Okay. So the girls love to play and climb and crawl, and for me as well, I suppose, with the background in childcare and Montessori and special needs, I really see the benefits of giving kids, your time, and getting down on the floor and playing with them and having conversations with them and exploring with them. So I had gone back briefly to work as a special needs assistant in a preschool, and I was working with a boy, and we would take some time out and we would go away and do some exercises. And I suppose because I enjoyed yoga and I was, dabbled a bit myself, I was doing it, and from my rugby playing days, I the warm up stuff and the training and things like that, you they all come back to you, and you're kind of doing them. And I thought, and he really improved, his strength really improved, and then I was doing it a bit more with the girls here at home, and they were really enjoying it. And actually, breath work, I'm really passionate about breath work. I think it's just one of those underrated things that we carry with us everywhere. And it's such a magnificent tool that we can use at any time to help to ground ourselves, whatever the situation that we find ourselves in, good, bad, or indifferent. And I saw the benefits of that with the girls, because they've got their mommy's temper. And I could see it. I could see them taking the minute, some of the times, to take a breath and go, okay, and that. So anyway, along came children's yoga. I kind of thought, what, this wouldn't it be great if there was kids yoga? I was actually on and on at a friend of mine to do it. She's a yoga, and she said, I can't do everything. She said, you go do it and teach, out with me. And I said, all right, okay. So I looked at it, and I found a children's yoga course, and I signed up for like a 3-day intensive kind of training, and I loved it. But I felt I needed to learn more. I always want to give everything my best. So, I want to learn as much as I can.
Yeah.
And so then I went on a couple of months later and did a 5-day, 7-day, kind of intensive one again. And that really deepened my knowledge a bit more. So after that one, I then set up and started running the kids yoga. And again, I could do it as an after school. So the girls could be with me as well. So it worked around us.
Loved it. Yeah, because it's something that I would have loved to have had when I was a kid, to kind of understand that type of kind of
the
training.
Wonderful thing about it is, because some parents have said to me, oh, my kids are too high energy, for yoga is, too relaxing and stuff like that. But actually, kids yoga is playful yoga. So I mean, you're doing down dog, but you're also walking around the room barking. I mean, it's fun. It's playful. There's games. You're playing.
It's not
you're
the
playing childhood games
and stuff that you'd normally get.
Nobody is sitting still, and if anybody knows that, it's me, because mine, like, they have springs in their feet. They're always up and they're always talking, and it's always all go. So it has to be next with kids yoga, and you just have a million ideas. You have a plan, and then you go in with your plan, and then just get ready to throw it out the window. So I always say you've got to meet kids where they're at. So if they're a little bit low, then we might start the class a little low, and then adjust accordingly. But that's more about the classes. But anyway, yeah. So yeah,
But
the kids yoga.
what kind of advice would you give to parents though, as well, as you say, like who think that, who maybe just don't experience it? Because I think kids yoga is probably relatively new as
Yeah.
a trend, is it, or has it been around for a long time?
Stephen, it's probably been around, but it's becoming more popular. It's becoming one of those more popular after school activities. You'll see it popping up, but no, it hasn't. It's not massively.
And would it be like kids from as soon as they're kind of walking, or they have to be a certain age, or what? What way does it work?
Yeah, no, I mean, you can start them at like, you can start doing, little yoga movements with them yourself and their babiys,
Yeah,
right up to toddler. And then that's kind of different, that's more about singing songs and having puppets
yeah,
and moving that way. And then you move into the next stage and the next stage. And you see it now with my girls who are 8 and 9. And depending on the 8 and 9-year-olds, they can be a little bit too cool for the kind of even the yoga that I might be doing some days, so you
yeah.
need to
It's funny, isn't
up
it,
your game again.
when you see some photographs of people and they're doing their press ups or their yoga or something, and the little kid beside them, and they're trying to
Yeah,
do all the movements as well. But like that's the start of it, right?
yeah, that's it exactly. Yeah, yeah, and you know, no one better positioned than kids to. I mean, sure, they're like elastic bands. It's
Yeah,
great for them. They can do it and as they say, use it or lose it.
yeah,
So keep it up as much as you can throughout. It's
I love
not,
it. Yeah, and
yeah.
so from that, um, you didn't stop there, right? So like the Play Like Apes obviously was founded, and you were playing like an ape with the
Yeah,
kids and
yeah,
enjoying life and getting down and dirty with them all. And then I remember getting a phone call off you, and you turned to me and you're like, "Do you know what? I'm gonna write a book. I'm gonna write a story." I'm like, "Huh? What are you doing?" So tell me about that and where that came from. Uh,
lockdown,
sorry,
lockdown madness.
Elsie's Arabian Adventure.
There it is.
Let's just say anybody who's looking for Elsie's Arabian Adventure, DM Sarah right now.
Yeah.
Get the promo in there, you know.
Um, yeah. So look again, like as I said, lockdown madness, really, isn't it? I mean, I was busy obviously during lockdown. I had the girls home. We were homeschooling, and I also had signed up to take on a play therapy course,
Okay.
an introduction into play therapy, which is a FETAC course. And yeah, there's lovely therapy. The section on therapeutic stories kind of was. I was like, that's really nice. I have a couple of ideas now for doing as part of the course a therapeutic story. But it was really just listening to the girls. Again, when you stop and you listen, it's amazing really what you'll hear. They were out in the garden, and literally every sentence out of their mouths is, "You pretend you're so and so, and I'll pretend I'm our. Let's pretend this is that." And they were just all up in their heads and their imaginations, and just everything was fun, and it was just great to listen to. And yeah, I kind of just thought, God, it'd be great to write them a story, to write a story, about them, with them as the characters, kind of, and at the heart of it as well, I really wanted to look at anxiety, because that we've two deep thinkers. One even, in different ways. They're both deep thinkers. One, you might say, a little bit more than the other, but they just approach things differently. But warriors, and we had, obviously, with COVID, I mean, and kids are brilliant and kids are resilient, but they still worry, and they still have concerns. And we've had tears with, "We don't want you to die, and we don't want to die." And we're careful again, we try not to really let them hear the news too much, not age appropriate, kind of, so we might explain things as they're happening and stuff like that, but not necessarily listening to news reports and stuff like that, but still they're picking it up.
Mm.
And Yeah, so I kind of found like doing little, again, the breathing and getting out and playing and creating with them and stuff like that helped, So, but anxiety is something I think we can sometimes still be a bit dismissive with kids, because we kind of go, yeah, they're resilient, they'll be grand, that this won't affect them or won't bother them, but it really, really does. And different kids in different ways, and some kids more than others. So it was just something that I wanted to kind of address in the book in a small way as well, was through using expressions, because we're Irish, we have an expression for everything and everyone, and something to say about everything. And but I wanted to kind of bring in the saying side, because I was reared on sayings. Everyone had, mom had an answer for everything in some sort of an expression or a saying way.
You're a bit famous for your different sayings and repeating certain phrases, aren't you, Sarah?
Mostly I get them wrong. So I was heavily edited for this, because I'm one of those people who says things and gets them always muddled. And I tell jokes, I tell the punchline before but the joke, but so little things like that. So originally the story started off as Close as Crocodile to the Boat, because that is something that Brian would always say to me as well, when I'm working on projects and stuff like that, and I kind of want to get everything done, and I'm trying to keep on top of everything, he would just say Close as Crocodile to the Boat, meaning what's the biggest thing that needs to be sorted out at this very moment, and then just worry about that, and then move on to the next crocodile and the next crocodile, and so on. And it started off as a picture story. And once I sat to start to write it, again, I was lucky. I found that there was, again, like I was like, I'm going to write this book, and it's going to be great. And then it's like, oh, who's going to illustrate it, and where would I get it published, and how would I go about doing this, that, and the other? So like that, you can only do so much yourself. So I researched and looked in, and luckily enough, another local author here in Kildare was running a course to write your own children's book, a 6-week course. And I love a deadline, because that motivates me as well. To start and finish something. Otherwise, especially writing a book could really, you could drag it out over years if you wanted to. So it chopped and changed, and it eventually became more of a short chapter book. And Elsie, who is actually a combination of Ellen and Lucy, the two girls' names, was supposed to be just one character, and she was a mash of the two of them. But then they morphed out. So I kept Elsie and I threw in an Ellie, which is so that's basically kind of the two girls. And Ellen, she gives people the book, and she goes, open page, whatever. I'm famous now.
Yeah. And Milani as well, I believe, is the surname, huh?
Yes, my nana's maiden name. Yeah, absolutely. Another inspirational, person for me in my life as well. Yeah, Nana.
So it is interesting though that your theme though for the book is obviously sounds like it's obviously the idea is born out of the kids and listening to the kids and kind of taking a little bit of understanding of what they're going through and then trying to teach others how to manage anxiety. Obviously the theme for this one is anxiety, and Elsie goes on her Arabian adventure, which is fantastic because what I love about it is that it's opening up the world to Elsie and to kids that they may not have kind of considered before, but in what's the takeaway that you'd love for people to kind of leave having read the book?
Well, well, I suppose the real thing would be talk to your friends, talk to your family, talk to your kids. If there's ever anything going on, talking is key in helping any of us. And then again, it's a kid's adventure as well. So, but also the cultural side of it. So they visit Dubai. There's references, to the language, the Arabic language, and some Arabic food, because obviously my passion for food is still very much there. So, educate as well, very much at the heart of this offering kids the opportunity, because our island is growing and we have so many new and diverse cultures now living here, that it's important. It's important that our kids understand other cultures.
Yeah.
And
And like you look at Ireland has a diaspora of about 76 million, so like we've got people all over the world and we've gone and infiltrated all the other countries and cultures and stuff. So
absolutely,
now the fact that we're here in Ireland and that we've got so many different cultures and identities and stuff coming in to the country, it's important to be open and be accepting and to understand others, and you can only do that by listening and talking, right?
absolutely. And I mean, our next generation, is always our opportunity to get it right, so and to offer, like, to teach them what we might not necessarily have learned, about different religious holidays, and
Yeah.
traditional food, traditional clothing, anything, all of these, things that are not day in, day out, but they're there.
Yeah, and I think what I would take from that is, because it's different doesn't mean it's wrong, and because it's
Yeah,
different doesn't mean you should turn away from it. Different is okay, and different allows you to be inquisitive and be curious about it and to try ask the questions and to understand. And I think if you encourage kids to do that at a young age, to be curious and to ask questions and to be like welcoming and all that, that'll stand to them for the rest of their life, because you're setting the kind of the foundation blocks. Now, I don't have kids, all right, and that, but I have in the girls, like, incredible, I suppose friends is what we've become, as well as uncles and whatever, and nieces and stuff. But we've
yeah,
become really, really brilliant, close friends. And I think they know that if anything ever they wanted me, that I'm there for them. Like I think they're aware of that even at this young age. But um, what I love to when I do get to see them is that they're always inquisitive. They're always asking me, what am I doing? Where am I going? And what news have I gotten? Like, where are you living and who you meeting and all these things. They love it because
yeah,
they're interested in my life. And I think that interest then kind of is comes across then in their friendships with their family and with their friends and stuff, because they're actually interested. That's probably why they talk all the time.
good. And do they talk? But you're right. But now, like, we have it, they're coming up, everything is new to them. It's our responsibility as their guardians to expose them to, all of this, in a positive light. And as you said, not good, bad, or indifferent, just they are who they are, we are who we are, and it opens them up. They're more tolerant, they get it. It's not shock and all,
Yeah.
they're very aware of things more so than we ever would have been growing up,
Yeah.
I mean, even with all of the news, and whether it be Donald Trump or Black Lives Matters, or, they're tuning into all this, and they're asking why, and
Yeah.
you've got to be prepared to answer them, and give them good foundations, again, age appropriate, but to let them know what's going on in the world, and that there's a lot of injustice and how privileged they are.
Yeah.
I'm very, very passionate about letting them know how privileged really they are, for their education, to the clothes that they want to wear, to the places that they can go, and the travel that they can, hopefully go back to taking sooner as they grow, that it's important that they understand that not everybody lives the way that they live,
Yeah.
and again, that this might introduce and open up the questions in families,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
let the conversation start. It's a conversation starter, why would, like, because at the back of the book I have in referencing what the hijab is, so why different cultures do, so it starts the conversations.
And tell me, why did you start with the Arabian Adventure? Why wasn't it an adventure to Lanzarote? Like,
Yeah, honest to God, yeah, that's where I wanted to go. Well, I suppose, again, going back to my military roots, really, I suppose, since I was less than a year old, my dad was gone overseas to serve in Lebanon. And uh, as years go on, and he did, I don't know how many trips overseas out there. And then in 2005, he moved out there for a year and didn't come home for 12 years. So the Arabic culture is very much now a part of our family, so we really only ended up in Dubai because Elsie, aka Lucy, is absolutely horse mad, and it just made sense to go to Dubai really as opposed to Lebanon, But I still wanted to include the Arabic side to it, and the picture of the souks and some of the pictures and things like that are actually from the souks, in the town where Mum and Dad lived back in the day. But yeah, so
Lovely.
major Arabic
So
influences in this house.
This won't be the last adventure, I hope.
No, I'm hoping that Elsie will. I'm working on another little project at the moment.
Of course you are.
My brain just.
It's going to be an exclusive, is it?
Yeah, an exclusive. Yeah. Well, I've just finished up what I'm working on, and it's. I need someone to edit it. You can be getting an email later.
No problem.
Yeah, and Elsie's African Adventure is where I'm hoping to head next, because again, even here in Kildare, I mean, we have so many. I can't think of the name of the word now. Gosh, not resource, the hotels, Steve.
In direct provision.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
I think it's and again, speaking to the girls and how privileged they are and stuff like that. So the culture, again, I think it's really important that they understand the culture where people are coming from, and how they got here and why they're here, and all these things I think are really, really important.
Yeah, I think you're dead right. It's actually interesting that you say that, because I've got a lady coming on the podcast, and she's from Kenya, but she's going to talk to me about the human rights issues that are going on in Kenya at the moment, and the challenges that are there for girls growing up, so that'll be quite interesting. But I think you're dead right, because there's so many elements of the world that I suppose they're so far away that we don't actually kind of consider them, like the Arabian Adventure, and for others, Africa as well. So it'd be great to get a context of that, rather than just going to Spain or over to Portugal or whatever,
Yeah, but there are other European countries as well, and there's probably, but to really beyond that, and to explain to them, where these people who are living in our town are coming from, and as their journey,
historical context.
I mean, but again, they're going to be asking, why are they living there? And I think we'll all have a lot to answer for in a few years when it comes to that. But anyway, I think that's for another.
Tell me this. I do ask this quite a lot, and the responses are quite varied and different. But if you had the opportunity to leave a message, or to write on a piece of paper a message that you could share with everybody, what would that message say?
Yeah. Do you know, in the, I'm losing my words now, the dedication for the book, in the dedication part, because it's dedicated to the book, to the girls and Brian, Mum and Dad, my supporters, but is a quote from A.A. Milne. I think I'm saying that right. But you're braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, and smarter than you think. And I think that covers a lot of different bases. Give yourself a go, believe in yourself, trust yourself. You're stronger than you think, and you are smarter than you think. It's easy to put yourself down or not try something, but give it a go. Believe in yourself.
Yeah, I love that. I think I think if everybody kind of went and approached life like that, they'll open the world up to so many different opportunities, and especially in the world that we're living in right now, where things are quite tricky and tough because of the lockdowns and pandemics and COVID and stuff. It's very hard to stay optimistic and stay focused. And I think it's a case of just remind yourself that, yeah, you are better than what you are, will go a long way, and that you can do whatever it is that you're aiming to do. And I think you're proof of the pudding as well, Sarah, in that approach, because you've gone and you've raised an unbelievable family. You've created a number of different entities in terms of businesses, that have been born out of you with being willing to learn and to get down on the ground and play with the kids and get to listen and get to hear and talk to them. And I think it's a credit to you and what you're, I suppose, what you're about. So for me, I'm only thrilled to have you on board and to share this time with you and create this memory and have this to share with the kids as they grow up and they slag us when we get older and stuff. But
They're all flagging us. We
yeah,
are
no,
older.
yeah, exactly. But like,
We're
no,
ancient.
but genuinely, like these things, these kind of, this project and this personal thing of mine is to share these moments with people that I care about and the people that inspire me, and you're definitely one of them. So thank you so much for being part of what makes you tick. I think we've definitely found out what makes you tick. You never know, we might make this a kind of like an annual thing. See what happens
Yeah,
next.
see where I am this time, 12 months. Yeah.
Yeah,
Why not?
but listen, no,
Yes.
thank you so much for being on board. All right.
Thanks, Steve, and thank you for all of your support and the inspiration that you give me by you doing things like this, and in your day-to-day. You're an inspiration as well.
Legend.
Ledge.